From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good afternoon. Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Taylor Knight. The 2020 elections will be held on Tuesday, November 3rd. While this is more than 10 months away still, the election machine has been gearing up and will be in full swing in the coming weeks. All 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and 35 of the 100 seats in the U.S. Senate are up for election, and most importantly, the office of president. Today on 22 News in Focus, we'll be discussing what we can expect to see leading up to Election Day. Joining me now is political consultant Tony Signoli of A.L. Signoli Company. Thank you for being here today. All right, let's start with the presidential election. The number of Democrats kind of dwindling at this point. A couple of Republicans running against President Trump. Which of the Democratic candidates do you think will make it to the convention?
The one who's got the money. That's what it's going to come down to in a large case, because right now the top four are so tightly tied together. You know, Biden, Buttigieg, which is a surprise, obviously. He's come literally from nowhere. Who knew who he was 2 years ago? But Warren and Bernie, and they've got avid support bases, and they're continuing to raise incredible money. Bernie's money especially is interesting because he's raising more and he's getting an average of $18 per donation from average regular folks. That means you've got the ability to keep on moving. Those folks can give a lot more money before it's all said and done. But the simpler, faster answer to this, we're going to see what's going to happen between February 3rd and March 3rd. It'll be definitive then. You'll be down really to 4 or 5 tops who will be able to make it all the way through. And there's the factor of Michael Bloomberg. You just don't know when you're looking at that kind of money being spent in this campaign.
Lots of money from him.
Stunning, shocking, yes, yeah.
All right, so who is in the lead right now, and do you think that they can keep that momentum up at this point?
Well, every poll is showing something different, and every state is a little bit different. But what's amazing is that Joe Biden, despite some gaffes and some stumbles, and frankly, as he himself would say, being the old guy in this race, you know, the old champ who's come back into the ring, he continues to hold steady. And he's got a middle lane where he's challenged basically by Buttigieg at this point. You know, he should be able, if he can win South Carolina, if he can place well enough between February 3rd and March 3rd, it gives him an edge. But certainly Bernie, with all those avid delegates and supporters of his, all those people that are out there, he's going to be contender in here. Kingmaker or queenmaker somewhere. Elizabeth Warren, don't count her out. Her organization is incomprehensible in so many states. And that's what it all comes down to. We all know enough not to trust the polls. But if we look at the polls, those are the top four still. But again, you don't know about the factors of money from Bloomberg. And lastly, it all comes down to organization. Because in the cold of Iowa and New Hampshire, in these upcoming months, in the next few weeks, you know, it all comes down to who can get their voters out to the polls to vote.
So you say February 3rd to March 3rd. Just what's happening during that time?
Sure. These are the first caucuses and primaries. So certainly there's the Iowa caucuses first, followed by New Hampshire's primary, then bang, Nevada, then bang, South Carolina. And then quickly you get to March 3rd. You get to Super Tuesday. And what's amazing about Super Tuesday this time around is not only is it 1,345 delegates that are at stake, I mean, you do well on that day, you sweep most of that, you're on your way to the nomination. But California is part of that. And that's why I mentioned the money again, too. You've got to have a lot of money to be able to contend in California, not just with the ground organization. For a state that large with as many media markets that it has, and it's expensive. We talk about how expensive it is to buy time in New England. Holy smokes, the California market. You need $6, $7, $8 million really to play there. Just that one state out of all of them on Super Tuesday.
And these candidates already have that?
Some do, and that's the thing, you got to be so careful. The budget is such a big part of this. There's so much strategy to a presidential campaign, but a big piece of it is that budget. Usually we try to go backwards from an essential primary, and here it's this run of primaries and caucuses from the 3rd of February to the 3rd of March. You don't worry so much about after. You got a place now. Throw as much of it as you can afford to right now. It's usually our rule of thumb on the financial sense.
All right. Well, Massachusetts has 2 contenders right now. Let's start with Elizabeth Warren. You know, what are her chances right now?
They're good because of the fact that she's got the organization she does. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, her polling has been off. She's dropping in numbers as more undecideds are starting to decide really between Bernie and Biden and Buttigieg, the 3 Bs, as we like to say. But she's got grand organization, and that'll count for a lot. You know, voter identification and getting out the vote on these primaries and these caucuses, that's what's key. Can she do it? that's what she's going to have to rely on. So she's still in this without a doubt, no question there. The other thing for her, I think overall, is that so many of her plans haven't just been simple and easy to understand. They're complex. She's taken risk on some of the things she's put out there. So she's playing to a higher level in that regard. Now we'll see, does that work or not with the kind of voters that come out in primaries and caucuses?
So we also have former Governor Deval Patrick.
Yes.
He kind of came late to the race.
Very.
What are his chances?
You know, the thing with Deval Patrick is that he comes very, very late to this. In fact, we know for a fact, and it's not a great secret now, it was literally about 48 hours in advance of his announcement that he made the final decision. It was in less than in fact, in 24 hours, he reached out to a Springfield video firm, New York Sound and Motion, to do his video for the very next morning. They had to do this overnight. So that's how late and last second this really is. A little bit of the insider piece of that. But what's amazing is that he's got some legs in certain places that are important. I don't really think this is a presidential campaign. He'll say that it is. It's how well he does running for president that perhaps puts him in contention as a vice presidential pick. Is he someone that rounds off a ticket for a Biden, for a Buttigieg? It's possible. One other thought about Deval Patrick that a lot of people don't really say in my profession. It's the unspoken part of this. There are many, many, many common points of contact between Barack Obama and his team, Joe Biden and his team, and Deval Patrick. You've got a lot of the same consultants, friends, and advisors in those circles. Are they thinking about that for down the road if there's something that could be brokered? But again, it all depends on how well Deval does. He's got to come in 4th and 5th in a few of these key first states.
So you bring up vice presidents. Maybe if it's not Deval Patrick, what are the chances of the presidential candidate picking another candidate to run as a partner?
You know, it always makes sense. That person's already got name recognition. They've been through the fire of the process to get to a caucus, to get to a primary, but still you want to round off that ticket. A Biden, Deval Patrick makes sense. Biden and Booker makes sense. Cory Booker may not have caught fire as a presidential candidate, but he's stayed in the race. He's a fighter. He's got a compelling and incredible backstory, and it rounds off that ticket. Biden has the most strength right now with African-American voters, and it seems to be now, too, with a lot of Hispanic Latino voters across the United States. He's got to further embrace the community. He's got to further make that case, and if he can, that could be very helpful to him. And again, that's only if Biden's that top player. But the answer to the question, sure. Amongst this field, there's probably a vice president, not just a presidential nominee.
All right, we'll continue our conversation after a short break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today, we're discussing the political climate during this presidential election year. Political consultant Tony Signoli is here to talk about many issues. Let's start with Trump right now.
Sure.
What are the chances that he or another Republican can win the nomination over a Democrat right now?
Well, there's the whole piece. Certainly, he's got an incredible amount of money. Just, it's a difficult question to just answer the simple kind of a way. Right now, as an example, Donald Trump has raised and spent more money in the last 2 months than all the Democratic candidates combined.
Wow.
And they're doing it brilliantly on social media where we don't really see it, where you can't really get the drift of how impactful what he's doing is. He'll have no real Republican challengers, so certainly he's the nominee on the Republican side of the aisle. Up against the Democrat, it's going to be a shooting match here. It depends on who he's matched against, and that's why still, this late, even now that we're down to the crucial month, you've still got 5 or 6 significant contenders for the Democratic nomination. Amongst Democrats, there's a lot of concern and fear, Taylor, as to who is that right person that can take him on. He's been hit a zillion ways to Sunday with so many issues. And yet, if you look at his numbers, it's not just his base. He's still got that 45% of America that's willing to go out and vote for him, especially in the key states that helped him to get elected in the first place.
So you just mentioned really no other Republicans that are running are going to...
No, Bill Weld, God bless him, he's out there. It's a chaotic kind of a campaign right now. He can't get a debate with Trump. He can't really place anywhere. And whatever Republicans will say, whether they like Donald Trump or not, they know this is their horse.
All right, switching gears here a little bit, there's a few issues right now, both domestic, worldwide. What are the top issues that are of concern domestically, the economy, education, stuff like that?
Economy is always number one. And, we can all go back to remembering James Carville laying it out for Bill Clinton in that campaign. It's the economy, stupid. He always came back with that. It's everything has to reach back. But by that, what we really mean in my profession, it's the economy for that person in Ohio and California and South Carolina, here at home in Massachusetts, that impacts you personally. Being able to pay your bills, being able to have more than $1,000 in cash on hand at any given time. About 60% of America can't put their hands on more than $1,000 in cash right now. Those average regular folks, do they get moved and motivated enough in this election to come out? It's when they get impacted, when it's the price of gas, the price of milk that hits them personally, it's the cost of health care. All those issues can be explosive, but it's always first and foremost. And the economy pretty much ties to every other issue as well, especially the environment. There's niche issues, important issues that will move people, the environment, immigration, but nothing like the economy will overall. It's the wallet and the pocketbook that move voters more than anything else.
All right, now there's this conflict with Iran. How much will this international issue play into these elections?
A lot depends on what goes on, and this is volatile, and history can repeat itself. For 100 years, the United States has had a strange ongoing battle with Iran, positive, negative, the Shah. I won't go into a whole historical piece on this and whatnot, but this can change by the moment. And remember, in 1980, Carter versus Reagan, it had a massive impact. The hostages being released one day after Reagan became president, etc. Again, not to go into history, it all depends on what's next. And not just with Iran, but the other actors, the other characters in the Middle East, Hezbollah, etc., that might play into this. Anything can flip on a dime at any given moment, and that can have massive impact here. We've noticed how quickly this issue has gotten Democrats running to go from just talking about only domestic issues to the first time talking about, the larger issues, international issues.
So could this sort of help if they say the right thing? Could it hurt if they say the wrong thing?
You got to play this one right. This is the kind of issue where you get weighed out as commander-in-chief, whether you're Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg, who we've seen talk very eloquently and wisely, given his own experience as a combat veteran in Afghanistan. He's able to say, here's what happened when I was in Iraq, etc. You look for that now. Now, for the first time, we're not just talking about immigration or impeachment or local issues, domestic issues. We're talking about foreign relations at a level of the impact of safety on the United States of America. You're looking for that commander-in-chief. For President Trump, it's key, too. He can't make a mistake right now. He's got to actually look and act the role of the presidency, perhaps in a different way than he has in the past. He's got to be able to own this attack and be able to say, here's how I made America safer. There's wiggle room with the voters who haven't made up their mind yet as to how they'll feel about this before all is said and done.
So this is important. Going back to the economy here, is there concern about tariffs impacting the U.S.?
Intriguing. Again, it's almost like the other thing that we touched about the economy. It's how it impacts people personally. Is it impacting me when I go to, the local grocery market? Is it impacting me personally when I go out shopping? If I'm not really feeling it, if it's not egregious to me, I don't really understand the whole tariff thing. The average public will view it that way. If I'm a farmer in Ohio and this is hitting my soybean crop, that's a problem. And is it? I'm getting a bailout from the government while this is all going on, so maybe I'm not feeling it. It all comes down to how badly you really feel these tariffs. Right now, majority of America, the issue's too complex for them. It goes right over their heads, their eyes glaze over. They don't really understand it. And two, we had so many fears brought up about the tariffs. If we're still not really feeling it in the price of apples, gasoline, and milk, to the average person, it's not the biggest deal overall.
So besides Iran right now, the other big issue is the impeachment trial.
Yeah.
How will this impact President Trump?
Certainly, to be the only president, running for re-election while impeached, you'd think that would have some impact. Reality of polling, we're seeing that it doesn't have any. And here's something risque or perhaps I get myself in trouble saying this on this next piece, but as we're watching the polls, the week of impeachment was not a bad week for Donald Trump, not with his base and not with other folks who are kind of like saying, I'm not sure what I'm going to do in this election. He raised more money, spent more money, and the polls didn't move. This isn't like Richard Nixon, where you knew it was over, and even before the impeachment, he resigns. It's a little different. We're in a strange place in America right now. And it all depends on what average regular folks out there believe and are thinking. But the impeachment doesn't seem to be a big, huge weight to him. It depends on what else comes out now in these hearings. If in the Senate something of great revelation comes out, even if separate from a Senate trial or separate from the House impeachment, some grand, incredible revelations come out. I think every night people are wondering what Ambassador Bolton might have to say before all is said and done. And I think he's probably someone that keeps Donald Trump up at night, without a doubt.
All right, we are going to continue this conversation after the break. We will be right back. We've been previewing what voters should be looking for this presidential election year with political consultant Tony Signoli. So Congressman Richard Neal is currently the chairman of the very powerful House Ways and Means Committee, and he is being challenged by Holyoke Mayor Alex Morse right now. So what will this race look like?
You know, certainly for Neal, he talks about the track record, and not just recently, which is stunning in the last few months, to be the person at the helm, with some of the amazing things that he's done, whether it's been as one of the key chairs relative to impeachment or even the Canadian-Mexican trade deal. You know, as we're reading more about that, the stories about Richie Neal are amazing, that Republicans and Democrats working with him to come up with that. That's interesting. You know, when you look at that track record that he's had, you know, over the course of years, bringing money back to the district, that's something that weighs upon the minds of a lot of folks. Certainly, when you're looking at a race like this, you know, there's the aspect of philosophy or ideology that can come in, especially with two candidates like this. But you also take a look at who can bring back the most to the district. That's Neal's grand argument, without a doubt. On the other hand, Alex Morse is quite a campaigner, has been proficient, perhaps was underestimated when he first ran for mayor of Holyoke, but it's a big district. The geography of this place, the 1st Congressional District, is amazing, and it's so diverse. You've got cities and towns here that are conservative enough that voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and then you've got others that are solid, strong Bernie Sanders folks. So it's a tough one to campaign in, but I think this is quite a challenge for the two of them in a geographic sense. The other thing, too, is we look at the counties. Hamden County's vote alone, you know, so solidly with Neal for so many years now. That's a lot to overcome in a particular race like this. But it'll be interesting to see the debates that unfold as we get closer to September.
So in a district like this, what are some of the issues that, you know, everyone can kind of get behind here?
Sure. A lot of them are similar to the rest of what America worries about, but here we worry about something else. We worry about Washington and Boston forgetting us in Western Massachusetts. You hear that all the time. It's in so many campaigns, whether it's local House and Senate campaigns or gubernatorial campaigns, but there's a reality to it. You can make the case. It's why you need a powerful, you know, vociferous, powerful, energetic member of Congress to fight for you in Washington. And that may be the great crux of the argument here between these two candidates. Who can go to Washington, make the most noise, have the most relationships, and bring back what the people of Western Massachusetts need? We already feel in Western Mass, whether you're in Pittsfield or North Adams, whether you're in Springfield or Agawam, that we're getting the short end of the stick all the time from both of our capitals, from Washington and from Boston. I think those are some of the arguments that you'll hear. The philosophical and ideological, I don't think that's going to play a lot between now and September. It's about what can you do for me as my member of Congress.
So you said Mayor Morse was sort of underestimated at the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you think things have changed a bit now, and is that surprising?
His first race, he was so young, took on an incumbent mayor and won. So that would be where some people may have underestimated him. He's a great example in that campaign a decade ago of registering voters, of voter identification, and getting people out to vote. Can you do that in a big enough way in this congressional district as a challenger to Richard Neal, who's already got this gigantic base of voters who know his name? He's got the brand name recognition. It's a ground game for Morris. He's got to be able to do that. Quiet, we like to call it the submarine campaign. All the ads and then the lawn signs and all that kind of stuff is great, but it's the hard work of voter identification and getting people to come out and vote. That's where he would have to really put his hopes upon.
All right, so right now the Democrats hold the majority in the House. Is it likely to stay that way after this election?
I think in the House, yes. As we look at all the different House seats that are up right now, it looks like the House is strong. And Pelosi and Neal and others who raise money for their colleagues, they're continuing to do it very, very, very well. They're finding a more receptive audience than in the past, and a lot of new contributors too. Plus a lot of folks that are contributing to these House campaigns who are not the norms. They aren't the people that just write the $2,500 big dollar check. These are $18, $30, $50. There's a feeling out there. The House, I think, will stay the same.
How about the Senate?
The Senate, there's the question. You've got a couple of high-profile Senate campaigns right now where challengers, unlikely challengers, Lindsey Graham's challenger, Jamie Harrison, has raised a stunning amount of money against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. Mitch McConnell's challenger, Amy Granger, has raised more money on the first day of her campaign announcement than anyone else in that state ever.
Oh my God.
It's stunning. So there's challengers who have got money. Can they knock off a big name like the two I just mentioned? Maybe. But there are others that are a lot more closely contended. And it's so close, the margin in the Senate between Democrats and Republicans. It's a possibility. And I think that that would be the thing that the Democratic National Committee and others would be focusing on, as well as focusing on the presidency and the removal of Donald Trump with a Democrat. They've got to remember there's a bigger prize in the Senate.
Speaking of the Senate, we have a race here in Massachusetts, Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that race.
Wow. Ed Markey, he's got the pedigree, he's got the track record, but he's a quiet, laid-back kind of guy. Joe Kennedy, sharp, very, very sharp young man, 4 terms, prosecutor before that, and he's got something else. He's got that name. It's Kennedy.
Sure
and that's
does.
the piece. How does that work? Is there an aspect of that that still works? We are far, long removed from when Ted Kennedy was in the United States Senate. There's a whole new crop of voters out there. This is going to be a very hard-fought race between these two. And already what we're seeing is the aggressiveness of both campaigns in a positive sense. They're doing the voter ID. They're knocking on doors. Ed Markey's been around, but now he's got to make the case. Here's what I've done and why you want to keep me. Kennedy's piece is a little bit different. A Democrat challenging a Democrat, that's unusual. And what he has got to do is say, hey, I'm younger, I got a lot of energy, and here's how I outweigh all the good stuff that Ed Markey has done, because I'm going to have all this energy and I'm the man change now. It's a tough argument for both to have to get out there, but it's going to really be an amazing thing that also has another impact for us here in Western Mass. Normally in a big campaign, we kind of get forgotten out here because we've got arguably 8%, 13%, 18% of the vote statewide. But right now, the 508 and the 413, this is important. This race should be close. They've got a campaign out here. They got to win Springfield. They got to be in Pittsfield. They got to knock on doors in Northampton. Both of them. I think we're going to see an awful lot of Kennedy and Markey between now and the primary.
Well, that will be very interesting. We'll have the last word right after this break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today, we've been talking about the 2020 elections with political consultant Tony Signoli. Be sure to register to vote. If you're unsure about your voting status or where to go vote, you should contact your city or town clerk or election commission. That's our program for today. We want to thank Tony Signoli for joining us, and thanks to you at home for watching. If you missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful day.